So thank you, guys. Everybody can have a seat. So I've got time for a couple of questions. Yankees fan right here. Well, hold on a second. You know, we got a mic so everybody can hear you, even though I can tell you got a decent voice. Introduce yourself, sir.
Frank Caparasso, DePue, New York.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. My question is, during your term of office, will Buffalo see the transit system improvement for this country arrive here in Buffalo?
Well, you know, it's a great question, and I know that, you know, the issue of infrastructure and transportation is big here, but it's big all across the country. The Recovery Act that we put forward had one of the biggest investments in infrastructure since Eisenhower started the interstate highway system. But the backlog of work and projects that need to be done is so big that it's going to be a multi-year process that we've got to embark on. My hope is that Democrats and Republicans working together are going to be able to find a long-term financing mechanism and that we start investing not just in highways but also in mass transit, high-speed rail, and especially along the Eastern Corridor, and say where I'm from, Chicago, where you've got Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Indianapolis. You know, you've got all these cities that are pretty close by. They're half-hour, 45-minute flight, but if you had a high-speed rail system, a lot of people would end up using the rail system instead of flying. It'd be more convenient for a lot of folks, and you wouldn't have to take off your shoes. It would be good for businesses, because if we're building infrastructure, that means companies like Dave potentially have new sources of business. It would be good for our environment, because one of the things, obviously, that we have to recognize is that no matter what we do, oil prices are going to be going up over the long term. I mean, year to year, they may vary. Sometimes it's $4 a gallon at the pump. Sometimes it drops back down to 2.5. You're not always clear what's going on. But the long-term trend is up just because countries like China, they're starting to buy cars, and countries like India are starting to buy cars. And so the demand on petroleum and fossil fuels are going to be greater and greater. We've got to get a first-class transit system. And we don't have one right now. We used to be at the top. Now you've got China, they're building multiple high-speed rail lines all across the country, leaving us behind. But it's not just transit, it's our ports, our airports, you know, our sewer systems, our water systems. We're going to have to figure out how do we make those kinds of long-term investments, but do so in a way that doesn't increase our deficit. And that's going to be a challenge, but I think it's going to be a priority. Good question. And Yankees are doing pretty good right now. But you know I'm a White Sox fan. And we're going to come after you. We got started a little slow. All right, I'm going to go boy, girl here. I want to make sure that folks know I'm fair. Okay, hold on a second. Let's get the mic.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. About a month ago, Senator Hatch visited Buffalo, and it was right after the health care bill was passed, and he called it the Europeanization of America, using it as a derogatory term. What do you make of this? Well,
you know, first of all, Orrin Hatch is a gentleman. He was just visiting with me in the Oval Office, and I enjoy his company. This is sort of a reporter question, though, isn't it? This is a budding reporter. There's been a lot of rhetoric floating around on this health care bill. So I'll just explain very simply what's in the bill. And then you can make your own judgments instead of us slapping labels on it. Here's what the health care bill does. Number one, it's an insurance reform bill. And some of these insurance reforms are starting to take effect this year. So for example, one of the reforms ensures that all insurance companies have to let you keep your child on your health insurance up until 26 years old. Because as a lot of you know, when you leave college, sometimes getting that first job, you may not be able to get health insurance right away. And so we want to be able to make sure that those young people can stay insured until they get a job that has health insurance. Another insurance reform is making sure that insurance companies can't drop you when you get sick, which is a practice, unfortunately, that happens to a lot of people. Another insurance reform is making sure that you don't find yourself, after you've gotten sick, having hit what's called a lifetime limit, where, heaven forbid, you've got an illness that is really expensive, and you missed the fine print that said at a certain point the insurance company stopped paying. And so you go bankrupt anyway, even though you've been paying premiums all these years. So a big chunk of healthcare reform is just insurance reform. That's number one. Number two is what I mentioned already, which is tax credits to small businesses so that they can afford to either keep their employees' health insurance or they can start providing health insurance to employees that don't already have it. And for most small businesses, they're going to get up to 35% tax break on their health insurance bills. And if you talk to small businesses, that's a big deal. Number three, for people who don't have health insurance, and by the way, the majority of people who don't have health insurance are working people. Really poor folks who don't work, they're on Medicaid. They already have health insurance. It's working families and middle-class families and a lot of sole proprietors and small business owners who don't have health insurance. So what we're saying to them is we are going to set up an exchange, which is basically a marketplace where you can buy your health insurance through this big exchange, and you'll be part of a big pool, which gives you better negotiating power with the insurance companies. That'll drive down your premiums. And if even with a better rate you still can't afford it, we are going to give you a tax credit to help you afford it. All right? And finally, now there are all kinds of other aspects of it in terms of encouraging prevention and funding prevention, but the other big piece of this is we want to work through the Medicare and the Medicaid system to figure out how do we start controlling costs. Because even if you tell the insurance companies you have to insure people with pre-existing conditions and you can't drop people when they get sick, and even if you allow people to buy through this exchange so it drives down their costs, if the underlying costs of healthcare keep on going up, then our costs are still going to go up. And so we've got to try to encourage the overall healthcare system to be smarter and use its money more effectively. And I'll just give you one example that probably a lot of you have. Have you ever noticed that doctor's office is the only place where you still have to fill out forms like 3-4 times in a row? Well, part of it is just because every other part of our economy is computerized. But somehow that's not true in our healthcare system. So what we want to do, for example, is provide the incentives for hospitals and doctors and so forth to get electronic medical records. And we want to tell the doctors, you know what, instead of us reimbursing you every time you take a test, so you end up going to because of something wrong, you go to the doctor, you get one test, then he sends you to the specialist, you get another test, then you go to the hospital, you get a third test. We're going to pay you for one test and then email it to everybody else. Those are the kinds of things that help to save money over the long term. Now, we've got to try a bunch of different things in order for us to save money, but that is our basic approach. So here's the bottom line to your question. If you've got health insurance that you're happy with, you're going to keep it. Nothing, you don't have to do anything. The only thing that you're getting is the insurance company can't drop you if, for example, your child turns out to have a chronic condition. So it's giving you more security. If you don't have health insurance, we're building off the free market off the existing system of private employer-based insurance, and we're saying this is going to give you a chance to get health insurance that's a little bit cheaper. I don't know what that's called. I just think it's a good idea. All right? Okay.